Hi, everyone, and welcome to the new era with NEXERA. My name is Cheryl Wiedmark with Into Communications, and joining me as my guest today is Stacy Romack, Senior Training Specialist at NEXERA. And you guessed it, we are going to be talking about training, but more specifically, the importance around having trained service techs in the field making your service calls. And Stacy, welcome to the show. The first question I have is, why is this so important? Why are we measuring how trained a service tech is, especially in the field?
Well, first of all, I think that overall there is just a huge lack of workflows and proper procedures that are currently in place within our service departments that can uniformly and objectively gauge technician efficiency. And this is surprising, but we know this because we did a study using standardized grading methods, and we focused on things like mean calls between visits, callbacks, and hold for parts, and included time accountability, things like first call arrival and last call departure. And what we found is that 52% of technicians got an F letter grade. Wow. The technicians that got an A, B, C, or a D only accounted for between 12 and 14% of the total. We also looked at the top 10% of performers, and they had 0 techs with a D or an F letter grade, and they also had 49% of technicians with an A grade. So what does this tell you? It tells me that the standard by which we judge technical ability is either non-existent or it's just telling us what we want to hear.
So this might be a silly question. Why aren't dealers investing in tech training?
I think a lot of the issue stems from the fact that dealerships tend to see training as an expense rather than an investment. It's not enough just to take a tenured service technician and promote them into a supervisory role without them having the proper training and coaching and mentoring. And this results in a highly efficient service department. And we know that because our research has uncovered that 55% of all service calls are actually generated by the company, not by the customer. And that means that these are directly related to customer callbacks, hold for parts. We're not talking about courtesy calls, preventative maintenance calls, but it leads back to that inefficiency in recruiting and that lack of training. So imagine the impact if you did put a big investment in training and developing supervisors. You could see a 50% or even a 40% reduction in call load. And that can have huge impacts on your manpower requirements, your inventory requirements, response times, customer satisfaction, the list goes on. So dealerships that are not looking at tech training as a top priority right now are at a huge disadvantage.
So the dealers that are actually making that a priority and they are doing a really good job in training their service techs, what does that training model typically look like if you had to describe it?
Well, there's a couple of ideal items that we would want to see. Number one, you have to have those standards or benchmarks by which all of the technicians are equally graded and assessed. And we call these vital stats and performance stats. Things like callbacks, effective time, start and end times. You have to have that standard baseline to effectively gauge performance. Once you have that, you want to have structure in place in the form of a hierarchy that will allow clear communication of performance expectations that can be disseminated from the top down. Communication should not just start and stop with the supervisor, and we see this often. And what that tends to do is conceal larger problems that are happening in service. Additionally, you'd want to have a platform in which you could take all of this performance information and make sure that it's tracked, trended, and stored. This information should also be readily accessible to management at all levels, including technicians. So we should have them in there looking at their performance stats so they have some transparency as far as what they're supposed to be doing out in the field and what their job requires. Finally, we need to have regularly scheduled meetings between supervisors and technicians so they have the opportunity to understand their expectations and goals for performance. I think service management teams that do this effectively also have the tech sign off on those to establish some form of accountability.
Now, I'm guessing some of the dealers might have some concerns around training service techs and then having them either leave, go to the competition. Why should that not be a concern for dealers?
Well, I think the bottom line is that it's better to have a trained employee leave the company than having an unproductive employee stay. So you're not only losing out on payroll with somebody, a technician that's unproductive, but there's a ripple effect that actually impacts your entire service operation. So what you can do to mitigate this fear is make the right training investment. So just ensure that you're choosing a solution that's going to produce knowledge and skills your employees can utilize immediately so that there's a bottom line impact. And if you do this, there's going to be a tangible ROI as soon as the training starts. It's a win-win.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked a little bit about some of the risks of not training your service techs, but what are some of the positive outcomes that a business could expect to experience as a result of properly training service techs?
The outcomes are really staggering. We have some really great data. For example, we have tech time accountability increases of 56 minutes per day.
Wow.
Technicians close 30 more service calls a month, individual technicians. First call effectiveness rises by more than 20%. There is a 15% drop in parts spend. There's reduction in turnover. The ability to recruit the best techs increases, and overall customer satisfaction increases, just resulting from that faster response times, fewer callbacks, and an overall a more efficient service operation.
Yeah. Oh, I know a huge incentive for anybody looking for work is training. Training is something that they look for. They want organizations and businesses to invest in them, and therefore they can invest in themselves and their skill set. Why would you say, and I'm guessing you'll agree, that right now, given everything that's happening globally, this is the perfect time for dealers, for lots of industries, to invest in training, and specifically in this industry when it comes to service techs?
It's a great time, and the main reason is that we can no longer afford the inefficiencies that are occurring within our service departments. So we really, really need to start driving first call effectiveness and proficiency so we can recapture some of that lost revenue. So it's a great time to start employing some of that training.
Okay, last piece of advice, Stacy, that you can give dealers that are watching right now, potentially service leaders, operation managers, when it comes to training, one piece of advice before we go.
Well, if you're not using a uniform measurement that assesses overall tech performance, I would implore you to send us your data. And at no cost, we'll run your metrics and provide you with a detailed grade card for each one of your technicians. And you may be surprised what you see, but if anything, it'll give you an idea of where you need to start to get that efficiency rolling.
And you can't argue with no cost, that's for sure.
Yes, that is
Thank
true.
you. Thank you so much, Stacy, for joining us. For more information, you can visit the NEXERA website, and we will see you next time on the New Era with NEXERA.
Thank you.